Iranian nationalism from the time of Reza Shah has informed the consciousness of the Iranian people and their perception of themselves, both in time and space. The Shah constructed this nationalism at a time when Persia's existence was under threat from outside, as well as the trauma of famine, which had caused social collapse. It was necessary for him to create a national myth to ensure the survival of modern Iran, and that myth necessarily entailed the hatred of Semitic peoples, both Arabs and Jews, and wider xenophobia against the British, against Russians, whatever. In time, Persians see themselves as linear descendants of ancient cultures that have been threatened by Arabs on what is seen as an Arab religion, Islam. In geographical space, they see themselves as threatened by Arabs, as rivals, encircled by hostile powers, intent on the destruction of their culture, of that linear place they exist in. This sentiment has fed into academia and the Persian intelligentsia, and in spite of the Islamic Revolution, there is a constant need to put the Iranian nation above the Arab nations. And Ahwazi Arabs have paid the price for that national narrative. After the overthrow of Sheikh Khazar, the last ruler of Arabistan, by Reza Shah, the Ahwazi Arab people lost their self-government and power in 1925. The sociologist Turaj Atabaki believes this was a new stage of Iranian nationalism, which he refers to as ethnic nationalism, during which the pride of the Persian language was emphasized. This form of nationalism is very autocratic, as it considered the state dictatorship as a key factor in maintaining national integrity. Additionally, the prevailing elements of this national ideology were both anti-Islamic and anti-Arab. Like many authoritarian nationalist movements, fear has been the galvanizing factor, and fear necessarily leads to hatred. Fear of the outsider informed the nationalist narrative that identified enemies within. From 1925 onwards, the Ahwazi people have suffered national oppression due to political centralization and the Pahlavi dynasty's racist nationalism. The Arabs have suffered persecution at the hands of successive regimes. Arabs are feared, reviled, and hated as the historical enemy, according to modern national narratives of Iran. The anti-Arab nationalist was actually built even before the advent of the Pahlavi regime. The Shahnameh is xenophobic in its approach to national myth-making. There are 19th century writers helped maintain this myth. Fatali Akhundzadeh was one of the first writers in targeting the Arabs. He wrote, "Oh really, Iran, what happened to this great country? Where is her heavenly sovereignty gone? A handful of naked, barefoot, hungry and wild Arabs came to this country and brought pain and darkness." Akka Khan Kimani, a writer who was one of the first adherents of Baha'ism, described Arabs as the worst and most evil people, less than even animals. Because of these people, Iranian civilization has been destroyed. So we can have an idea of the depth of the hatred there. Even the place names have been Persianized. Arabistan is now officially known as Khuzestan to eliminate its Arab identity. With Persianization has come hardship and misery. Discrimination is seen on a daily basis in Iranian literature and among the Iranian elites and intellectuals. And this is spread through the media and books. All expression is repressed by the state. Music, customs, theatre, books, newspapers, everything is controlled by the Persian state. Discrimination is institutionalized, and economically, Ahwazis endure poverty on a par with Africa. I believe Yusuf Azizi said that the Iranian media call it black poverty, because they see this as the Ahwazis are like Africans. Arabs endure poor educational attainment. Illiteracy is high, particularly among the women. This is due to a lack of instruction in Arabic as mother tongue and a high school dropout rate. However, the attempts by the region's members of parliament to just repatriate 1.5% of the oil that's produced by the Ahwazi homeland back to al-Ahwaz or Arabistan to fight social deprivation has been opposed by the regime. So naturally, the impulse is to see independence as a means to break free from this national oppression. If remedial rights cannot be attained through the political system, then the secessionists believe that it's best to leave the country entirely. They argue, and this is not without justification, that racism and institutional control by an elite that excludes Ahwazis requires them to seek independence as a remedy for the injustices they face. Indeed, racism is even worse within the Iranian opposition than within the regime itself. So what hope do Ahwazis have in the revolution against the current regime and to be part of the Iranian opposition? The monarchists openly advocate the genocide of Arabs and the elimination of Arab culture, both in Iraq and what they say is a greater Iran, extended from the Levant to Afghanistan. They believe they want to take that over and reclaim it, including Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE. I've never seen Persian intellectuals, including Marxists, the Mujahideen, the liberals and others, put up a challenge to this endemic racism. The Iranian political culture deliberately chooses to exclude anti-racism because to fight racism means to destroy that national political narrative on which Iran is based. As such, I can see why Ahwazis would strive towards independence. But how realistic is independence? The UN Charter states that it is a right to self-determination of all people. However, the UN Charter is ambiguous in its precision. It groups the term people, but it's a kind of compromise. The United Nations practice has established the term people to refer to colonial populations, underpinning the process of decolonization, in ascribing the right to independence to former colonial entities. So it's European entities, like Ghana, like India, like Kenya. These were colonial entities that the UN Charter was designed to free. But as such, as international legal documents lack guidance on the entity entitled to the right of succession outside the colonial context, it's very hard to then claim independence legally. In reality and outside the context of European decolonization and the collapse of the Soviet Union, independence has been an exception. And these exceptions are the result of lengthy and violent conflicts that have left newly independent states with unimaginable humanitarian crises. The exceptions include Bangladesh, East Timor, South Sudan, Eritrea, and Kosovo. These are economic basket cases. The process of independent struggle has destroyed these countries. They're left without infrastructure. If you go to South Sudan, I think there's only 80 kilometers of paved roads in the whole of South Sudan. It's been bombed to death. And really, I think if there was a real chance of Arabistan or al-Ahwaz getting independence, by the time you've got it, everything would have been wiped out. Do you think that the Persians would leave you with one drop of oil, with one factory. They would obliterate it before you had the chance to get your hands on it. It would be like South Sudan or Darfur or these places. And that's a shame, but it's the reality. So in a sense, the struggles of peoples have been now more looking towards internal self-determination. We could look at Kurdistan, at Tevdem in Syria, where Tevdem and the PKK in Turkey are looking at internal self-determination, because they recognize that to go for full independence for Kurdistan would be such a human catastrophe that it would leave them with nothing. At least they have something with some internal self-determination. So I think in the Middle East you see Tevdem, PKK, PDK. These groups are fighting for some form of federalism. And they're winning, in fact. Öcalan has won the concept of self-determination within Turkey. There's a realistic idea that the Kurds in Syria will achieve some form of self-government, and you have self-government in northern Iraq. So it's there. Now, as for the Persian racism and chauvinism, even the most aggressive systems and ideologies have failed. In the US, slavery was abolished. Black civil rights continued to struggle. And blacks are no longer slaves in the US. They are empowered. They didn't separate. They became part of society. That's what they appealed to be part of. So, and now they have a black president. Things are not perfect, but they're getting there. 100 years ago, they were slaves. Now, there's a black man as president. And that was unimaginable. This could happen in Iran. There could be an Arab president of Iran. Why not? So, I think no doubt there will still be martyrs, and maybe Ahwazis need to fight for their material cause and their cultural aspirations. And I've no doubt that actually, there perhaps needs to be some kind of armed movement or involvement in an armed movement to defend Ahwazi interests. But I still think that in the long term, when you're looking at the material interests of Ahwazi Arabs, if you're looking at the political interests of Ahwazi Arabs, I still think there's a future within Iran. And but then again, I'm not Ahwazi, so I'm not going to tell anyone that independence is wrong. These are just my ideas, and I hope you take them as as a contribution to your national debate. Thank you.
Thank you.